You're listening to the NABS Now podcast, brought to you by the National Association of Blind Students, a proud division of the National Federation of the Blind.
Hey everyone, you're listening to the NABS Now podcast. I'm your host Nina, and on this episode, we're going to continue with our theme of employment that we've been working with for our last couple episodes. But today we're going to talk about soft skills, what they are, how you gain them, and why they're important for employment. So let's jump into it.
Good morning. Appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Anthony Goettl. I am a career counselor at University of Wisconsin Stout. I work with students across a variety of programs to deliver not only one-on-one career education and career counseling, but also am the primary person to do career education in the classrooms and outside the classrooms, meaning anything from internship seeking, resumes, cover letters, interviewing, any of this sort of stuff. And today, obviously, we'll talk about soft skills. So I give presentations on those things across our campus. A little bit about my background. I have a workforce development background. I've spent the majority of my adult professional life helping folks with vocational and occupational journeys. I have a voc rehab degree from this institution, Stout, and I have also worked in special education along with in the mental health realm and organizations. And so, which includes, job coaching, it includes employment specialists. I worked at the VA with veterans for a little bit. So most of my professional adult life has been guiding folks on how to not only seek, but attain and maintain their occupational journeys and empowering them to self-advocate and develop the skills necessary for them to be successful workers, but also be successful and happy human beings. So that's where we're at.
Amazing. So we actually did our last episode was on owning your own business. And then before that, we did a whole resume episode. So we've definitely touched more on the other aspects of employment.
Sure.
So I guess we'll just start out with something really general. To you, what does it mean to have soft skills?
Yeah, absolutely. So we often focus so much on, I always say tangible versus intangible, right? And when we think about tangible skills or tangible tools and resources, we're thinking about the basic needs of trying to pursue vocational pathways. So that is your resumes. That is, so how do you job search? How do you figure out point A to point B? Soft skills is very much the opposite end of you're still a person. And so while we have this professional pursuit, we forget there's a human being that's attached to this. And it's kind of this celebration or reminder of the human being that comes behind this professional pursuit. So your personality, your introversion versus extroversion, your kind of ability to relationally use your EQ to be able to navigate that search. So the difference between soft skills and hard skills is more of that personal relational side when it comes to not only pursuit, but then obviously in your interviewing phase and then when you get into this space, because we now live in a time where it's not good enough to just have one technical skill, one specific skill to walk into a space and be technically skilled or have a hard skill. Because even in areas like IT, for example, where we presume the soft skills aren't as important, you are always working with people. You are always trying to collaborate. You're always, life is a team game. And so soft skills are those skills that we try to develop from a relational, personality, behavioral side in order to be successful, not only in the search, but obviously when you get into that space with coworkers and other stakeholders.
I love that definition. I know when I first heard of soft skills, I was like, what does that even mean?
Right.
It's so broad. And so I know this is going to be kind of hard to answer because I'm asking you to narrow it down more. But can you pick maybe 3 or so, depending on how many you think soft skills, that we can kind of break down what they are and why they're important? Maybe some you work with your students on a lot.
Absolutely. And it's a great question because first and foremost, the caveat is this: one's soft skill development or relational development, personality. I mean, there's some things we don't necessarily change and we still want to own. So I think about personality. I think about somebody being introverted versus extrovert. We're not trying to change anybody. I always want to make that clear. Soft skill development is more about trying to get better at things. I don't believe in the deficit focus mindset. I believe in strengths focus. And so when I look at an individual student, the answer may be different for each person that comes through, right? But for me, generally speaking, when you look at soft skills, there are three to me that kind of stand out. One of them is communication. There is not a single, whether in pursuit or once you have an opportunity, there's not a single space where you don't communicate in some form or fashion, right? And we recognize communication can not only be the success and the failure of it can not only be dictated by things that are out of our control, whether it be cultural aspects or whether it be things like, I don't know, tangible things like lighting or noise. Communication can be impacted greatly by a litany of things, but us improving as a communicator is something that we can control within our own personality, within our own behavioral kind of mindset. So when I talk with students, we talk about things like come to the career conference and just have a conversation with employers and put yourself out there. This willingness to be uncomfortable to address some of the areas you feel like you'd love to be better at communication wise. But the reality is life is a team game, and you have to be able to communicate as effectively as possible in order to not only do your work effectively, but to hopefully understand the mission of the organization of the team. And that leads directly into teamwork. Life is a team game. Relationships are a team game. Working with no matter what, like communication, teamwork is going to be, even when you talk about entrepreneurism, right? You guys just had a podcast on it. I guarantee you'll be hard pressed to find an entrepreneur who hasn't been successful, even if it is their thing, hasn't been successful based on the collaborative efforts of bringing others into that journey. So when we look at teamwork, you have to think about it more broadly than just, I did this project in college and we had to do group work and I hated it because people were lazy and
I hate that.
and we all do,
so
right?
Relatable, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And so we get scarred from those experiences, and we don't have that romantic viewpoint of teamwork. We think about, I work with some student athletes in college, and they're wired. Same thing with the military. They're more wired and indoctrinated to an extent to think about the team first. And so it's about striking a balance to finding the independence to know you can contribute to the space while still understanding that in order to be truly successful and to help you succeed as an individual, being a better teammate and understanding your own teammates and coworkers and colleagues more will help everybody. And then it usually increases, obviously, the efficiency of the office. And then finally, the third one, which I debated, I did say earlier, there's three that stand out. I kind of debated because I think you could go many different ways, but I think finding your own leadership within yourself. And so I put an asterisk next to leadership because it can be very elitist. It can be very, and like many of these concepts, you think about professionalism in general, they very much can be dictated on who is the dominant culture. And we recognize there are certain communities, many communities, who are left out of that conversation. Professionalism is often assimilation. So I always want to talk about that in that same vein when it comes to leadership, and that you're still trying to be who you are as a human being, but still trying to understand how you can become a better leader and whatever that means in that space. And I think that that's why sitting down and individually getting to know each student, in my case, or each worker in the vocational setting, to get to know what their strengths are and what kind of leader they can be, because we have different types. We have very direct leaders. We have leaders who are supportive. We have leaders who are servant leaders. There's so many different leadership styles. I think that the more you empower the person to reflect on who they are value-wise, moral-wise, oftentimes you can kind of create that pathway for them to become good leaders. But I just want to make it clear, those are three. There's probably 3,000, and each person should reflect on where their own personal values and professional values lie to start to kind of react to where they think, what soft skills they think that they need to develop more.
I really like that explanation. I think that all of them kind of hinge on the ability to communicate and work together, and especially in the world now of remote working and like virtual employment. I know I personally work remotely a good chunk of the time, and you can really tell when some people are good oral communicators, but they can't write emails clearly to their team, or like a lot of confusion. So I think that's a really good point. You kind of like touched on all the aspects, which I really like. But how can students build these soft skills? They're a little bit harder. I know we talk about resumes, like, get your internships and make sure you have your references, but how can you build these, because they're a little more abstract.
Yep, absolutely. And I'm glad you put it that way, because they are abstract and they're going to look different to each person. So I think it's not a one size fits all. And that, I think that, I learned that from my background in doing case management and working one-on-one with each person to try to figure out, well, what are your strengths? So I like that point, because it's not a one size fits all, but there are certain things you can do and fit it towards who you are. So, some of the things we encourage, and I say this all the time, there's the corny quote of, a ship in the harbor is safe, but that's not where ships are meant to be, right? You're meant to sail. So encouraging students to be uncomfortable and to step into settings where maybe their comfort level is difficult. One of the things that I harp on, people will talk about all the time about networking. Now, networking is exceptionally powerful. Networking is important, but one of the things that I always drive home is that networking without the development of relationships beyond that is useless. And so it's okay to come in and say, go to that career conference and meet people and get business cards. But if you don't say to yourself, well, I want to take it a step further, all you have is business cards. You have an acquaintance. You don't have a connection that can help you grow your skills. So I'm always talking about, well, can we set up a job shadow? Can we do a follow-up email? Can we have an informational interview? Can we get into the space, or whether it be a virtual one or whether it be an actual space, to have a conversation to not only get the education necessary to help you grow your knowledge, but to put yourself out there personality-wise and behavioral-wise to feel more confident in stepping into that space and communicating, right? It kind of ties back to communication. So the reality is this can happen anywhere. This can be joining a student club in org to engage more individuals on your campus. This could be going to events on your campus just to be there and take it in. This could be going to your advisor more. This could be checking out the resources like ours or Trio SSS. I mean, there are so many different things you can do based on your own situation, based on your own program. And then one of the things I think is super important that really helps build character and helps develop those soft skills, and really I think the empathy as well, is volunteerism. I think not only does it look great on a resume, it helps a person grow, but it helps you grow from a communication standpoint and an empathy standpoint. Because I think quite often, this is just my personal opinion from wisdom and from experience, when we're able to see the world through other people's eyes, I think it helps us develop our soft skills more effectively. And I think the more effective you can be, and kind of, I always say, if it was a bone, the empathy bone, the more you can strengthen that empathy bone, the easier it is to step into the professional world and hopefully see how your servant mindset or your servanthood is affecting those that you're serving with and serving for. And ultimately, I think that helps you be more comfortable as a person. And it hopefully, if we do it right, it aligns with your own value system as well. So yeah, putting yourself out there, meeting people, developing relationships, and trying to create value within those relationships is exceptionally important.
I love that. I think that's solid advice. I think we build our soft skills every day, right? But we don't
absolutely
name them. Like, we don't think about that. We don't
Yep.
oh, I just went grocery shopping and I was talking to this person, or I helped this person, like, building my soft skills. Like, we don't
Yep.
really do that.
Yeah. And if you think about COVID too, and how you mentioned earlier, being so virtual now. And over the last 2 years, I think when you look at soft skills and soft skill development, it's really been in the spotlight now. There's this burning light as to a bit of an indictment on some people's ability to connect across various mediums of communication. Now, I think it's more of an indictment on not the failures of the people, but the failures of the system, in that we haven't been necessarily, I don't know, trained is the right word, but we haven't been pushed to leverage and value the relationships to help us develop our soft skills. And some of us kind of went into a shell, and I think some of our professional worlds allowed it. I think we ourselves allowed it. And I think it's also a product, obviously, of things that we can't control, like mental health and that sort of thing. So you ought to be cognizant. But the pandemic has been a perfect example of, for those that wanted an excuse not to emphasize those things, they often fell back on the comfort of avoiding those things. And I don't say that to shame whatsoever. I just say it as more of a fact. And I think that's just where people have struggled with the mental health aspect, is that we took ourselves away from some form of communication. And so a pandemic, obviously, hopefully when we get done with this one, we won't have to face it in our lifetime again. But I think it also introduced a little bit of a teaching moment for us in that how important those soft skills are within all settings.
So how do you suggest that we market our soft skills when we're going for an internship or employment, or I mean, even grad school or other kind of educational opportunities? They're a little bit harder to market for ourselves than
Right.
a resume is. So do you have any, like, tips for doing that?
Yeah, I think there's two sides of the coin. I think you can still use those tangible. So one of the things that I am big on is anybody that comes and works with me on a resume, I love to use a professional summary or professional statement. It's nothing huge. You're not putting together a novel, but I want to use that one piece of a resume where you can humanize yourself, because I think the job search and the hiring practices world, HR world, can become very sterile, very robotic, and you need to find ways to be able to market who you are and to bring your uniqueness to that piece of paper. So I'm always huge on putting together, even if it's just one strong sentence that really slides in who you are, where you've been, where you are, and where you're going. And so I don't want people to think you can't do that within those documents, especially when you look at the cover letter. So tangibly speaking, that is the opportunity to really highlight the person, because I want to remind folks the person is going to become the professional. And if we don't work on helping the person feel supported, then all of a sudden it doesn't matter if they get to be a professional, because you'll oftentimes see people fall apart or question what they're doing or even leave what they're doing because we didn't do a good enough job of supporting them holistically as human beings. So that cover letter is a really great way to tell your story. It's a great way to add in not only the tangible things of what make you great, but what makes you great intangibly, or that you're hoping to grow within that company, that organization, that opportunity. You're always trying to project, how can I get better there? What can I contribute there? And so we oftentimes just look very dismissively at those types of documents, and we can do a lot of work with those. We can really sell you and your journey. Same thing when you look at grad school, when you make a professional statement. They can be extremely pivotal for you getting into grad school, especially as we see more and more institutions going away from requiring standardized testing, which are not fair, not equitable, not accessible to everybody.
Yes.
And they leave folks out. So as opportunities fall by the wayside for you to really talk about what makes you unique and why they should give you the opportunity, well, those professional statements, those personal statements often come into play to be able to tell your story. And then on the other side, I think, again, that's where the relationship part comes in, and how you leverage relationships. So I'll give you an example. If you know, heading into an internship, job, or grad school interview, if you know who you're going to interview with, encourage you to get on LinkedIn, encourage you to use the web, figure out who you're interviewing with if they give you that information, and get to know not only that company and that position, that should be given, I hope, but that person. So I have never went into any sort of interview that I knew the people I was going to be interviewing with where I didn't look them up to try to figure out something that I could leverage psychologically. I don't know if it's the cleanest term to use, but I often talk to my students about ego stroke. That psychology piece is exceptionally important. If you can step into the space and be able to speak to something as to how you fit in with them, how you fit in. And I don't even really like fit, because fit's very much a word that we Eurocentric, Anglocentric. However, how you could contribute to that space and how you really want to contribute. But it starts before that. I mean, if you could step in and link you, your program, your school, your pursuit to that person and something they've done, human beings like that. Human beings like to know, wow, they did that research. Oh, wow, they took enough time to value me as a person, and I'm the person interviewing them. That can make a huge difference. And if nothing else, it doesn't hurt. But then I would say before that, don't be afraid to reach out to people. It's totally fine. On LinkedIn, on an email, if you can find their email. Mm-hmm. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to advocate for yourself. If you need accommodations, for example, absolutely advocate for yourself. But if you have questions about the interview or the position or the place, seek out resources and people that can answer those questions so you can feel more informed, because the more informed you are, the more confident you can be. And quite often when you step into those spaces, if you're prepared and confident, you are going to put your best foot forward. And it may not lead to the opportunity you want. You might get rejected, which is, is life. We can talk about that as well. But at least you knew you did the best you could. So again, I said it in many interviews myself. I just think relationships are the key to our successes. So trying to find and leverage relationships within those pursuits that you're going after is where the gold is, in my opinion.
It's the best feeling ever when you click with an interviewer, which obviously doesn't happen all the time.
Right.
I know I was job hunting for so long, and the position I currently hold, I was doing a phone interview, and I was on the phone interview for over an hour with my supervisor, because we just had very similar experiences, and there was a lot of questions about what, when have you experienced XYZ, and it was a lot about relationships. So I think maybe that when you do have interview questions about when did you have a challenge in the workplace, using those maybe as a segue to kind of flaunt your soft skills without being oh, I'm a leader,
exactly
kind of softly, no pun intended, but try to like work them in there, especially
Yeah.
for like human services and customer service, and a lot of that is really dependent.
Well, absolutely, because let's be honest, the power is in the people. And if you have successfully served people, and I mean not everybody's in the people business, but in a sense, when you take a step back, we are all in some form or fashion in the people business. So the power is always in the people.
Yeah.
And that's why I always talk about relationships. But to your point, we talk about like the STAR method, for example, situation, task, action, result, when you talk about interviewing. That's a behavioral way of trying to not only explain how you found resolution, but that's a way to tuck in those soft skills that you utilize without feeling braggadocious. Because for some folks, putting themselves out there and striking that balance between the humbleness
So
necessary,
hard.
it's so hard because not everybody feels comfortable with that. So I always talk about when I give interviewing presentations to students, if you're somebody that doesn't feel super comfortable, or there's maybe a cultural aspect, whatever it may be, whatever it is, let's sit down and talk about how we can still frame you to be successful while still recognizing your unique gifts. And that's a great way to tangibly do it, without a doubt. And that's a good exercise to practice as well. So let me know if anybody wants to talk about the STAR method.
Who knows? Maybe we'll tap you for a blog post sometime.
Oh, it sounds awesome. I'd be honored.
So those are all the questions I have. If you have anything else that you want to add, feel free.
Yeah, great question. So one of the things I will add, that if I had a mantra, it doesn't matter what kind of presentation I'm giving, but especially when we talk about this space, the pursuit of who you're trying to become, is to be yourself. I wish I could say it. I'd say it every day, 1,000 times over. If you came to my office, I'm still going to tell you it no matter what. We have to push industry to understand that not every person is going to be the same coming through these doors. And we have to hold them accountable for fair practices. But at the same time, we also need to have students understand that they're no less just because they're students. And as soon as you play small, you end up being small. And then you in the case of a lot of marginalized communities, end up, giving the oppressor the power. And so I don't want to be super dramatic about it, but the reality is everybody is unique. And we're trying to foster a space and a mentality that you celebrate your uniqueness and you bring the best version of yourself, no matter who that is, within whatever identities there are, into the space and into the pursuits of these opportunities. So I encourage you, as you develop soft skills and you look at, okay, here's what I'm naturally good at, here's areas that I look to improve at. Don't ever look at where you want to improve as faults. Look at it as opportunities for you to get better and own them within who you are. Don't think to yourself that I have to become somebody completely different in order to be successful heading into those pursuits and heading into those spaces. Because as I always tell students, yes, you want to get great opportunities, but if you have to sell your soul to step into those opportunities, then that's not the place you probably want to be long-term. So take your time, be yourself, develop those skills in whatever way is comfortable with you, and use your resources. I'll sit down with anybody and everybody to be able to help them become the best version of themselves. And if it means something more tangible that day, like a resume, great. But if it's more about the counselor side of being a career counselor that day and talking things through in a safe space, then that's what's going to help people feel empowered. So don't ever be afraid to be vulnerable, because that's where the growth lies, no matter if it's soft skills, hard skills, or just life in general.
Thank you so much. There's a lot of good information here. I think our students are going to find it really useful.
Wonderful. Well, I mean, people are welcome to reach out. I think you have my contact information. If anybody has
Yeah,
any
I do.
questions.
Perfect.
Thank you so much to our special guest, Anthony Goettl. I hope you all found this episode super useful, and we'll talk to you again soon.